Hello, everyone. I am super pleased to be here with the third year neonatal-perinatal medicine fellows at Stanford University School of Medicine. We are having a conversation today to talk about the fellowship experience at Stanford. And before we get started, I'd love to introduce everyone. So I'm Laura Hedli. I am the science writer for the division. And Sheila, take it
Yeah,
away.
I'll go. Yeah, my name is Sheila Razdan. I'm one of the third year fellows. I grew up in Baltimore, did residency in St. Louis, and then came out to California for the first time for fellowship training. I'll popcorn to Hannah.
I am Hannah. I am another one of the third year fellows. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and then I went out to the East Coast. So I trained in Philadelphia and lived there for 8 years before coming out here for fellowship.
And I'm Faith. I'm also one of the third year fellows and grew up in Minnesota, did all my training at the University of Minnesota, and then came out here for the first time as well to California to live and train for Neo.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for agreeing to this. I'm so happy we finally found a time. It's these folks are extraordinarily busy, and it's been challenging to get 3 hours together, but I'm so glad that we can. And you are about, 2 months away, right, from graduation at this point. And so now that you're wrapping up your time at Stanford, I'd love for you to think back to when you were applying to fellowship, and what made you choose Stanford, and how has the experience here compared to your expectations?
Yeah.
Sheila?
Yeah, I can go first. So I am a little obsessed with lists and organizing things. So I had an Excel spreadsheet when I was applying to fellowship. And I really thought about fellowship as 3 buckets. So I had a research bucket, a clinical bucket, and then a kind of everything else bucket, like my impression, the location, what made sense for my life. So from a research bucket, Stanford really had everything I was looking for. I'm really passionate about health equity work. I knew I wanted to do work in health equity. I have a background in public health. I did my MPH while I was in med school, and did some epi work, but also wanted to learn more qualitative research skills. So I was looking for a place where you could do health equity work in the NICU. And I think it's super common now, which I love, that more and more institutions are recognizing its importance. But even as recently as 3 years ago, you did not have health equity workers in every division. And so one thing that I loved about Stanford were that we had multiple attendings in our unit doing equity work and disparities work and research in it. And that the culture at Stanford made it really seem like this type of work was valued and important, not just in the division, but in the department and in the community at large. So having mentors directly in our unit was something that I really looked for, and I felt like I could have here, and was definitely true. And I actually should mention, so 2 of the attendings who do a lot of that type of work were not available on the day that I interviewed. So I didn't get to meet them on my interview day, but our program manager at the time, Wei Chen, said, email me if there's anyone you didn't get a chance to meet. And I took her up on that. I emailed her and said, hey, I would really love to meet Dr. Joachim Profit, who ended up becoming my amazing primary research mentor, and Dr. Henry Lee, who has since left Stanford but is still available to us for advice all the time. And there are other programs where they said, shoot someone an email if you didn't get to chat. But Wei Chen actually took my email, reached out to them, made sure they responded, and set up our meetings herself. So she took care of the Zoom link and everything. And it really felt like it wasn't an imposition or a bother. They were really invested in making sure, just as much as they evaluated us, that we had the chance to think about what being a fellow and training under them would look like. So the research was a big check. And then in terms of clinical training, I wanted to be somewhere where we did everything. So I wanted to be at a unit where you were going to manage kids on ECMO in the unit. You were going to manage kids on dialysis. You're going to have kids who have super complex surgical problems. But you're also going to see bread and butter neonatology because you're paired with a delivery unit. So we get all the kids who come over needing a bit of CPAP. And we get to do antenatal counseling for, things like rule out preterm labor, but also really complex congenital conditions with the fetal center. and we get to go to super high risk deliveries, and we get to manage and triage and delegate doing all of those things during the same day and the same shift. So I really felt like Stanford is unique in a lot of ways because there are a lot of, children's hospitals where the NICUs are freestanding units and you get all transports, but we get to see everything in one unit. And I thought that was amazing. And then from a personal point, I never lived in California. My husband and I have siblings who live out here in the Bay and love it. And, visiting them in the past made it clear that this was an awesome place to live. I think we would have a lot of fun. So, for all those reasons, I really fell in love with Stanford. And I'm so happy I'm here.
Yeah. No, I think that in the interview process and the application process, like the Stanford fellowship leadership and really made it a point to make sure that we were getting the information we needed to make this decision. And so like Wei Chen helped Sheila connect with her potential research mentors. My partner and I were planning a move together. So I was applying to a NICU fellowship, and then he was applying to psychiatry residency, like a research track psychiatry residency. And I remember it, like our timelines did not match up. So I was supposed to have my rank list done before he even interviewed at Stanford. And when I brought that up on my interview day, Melissa and then Anka Pasca, who is one of our neonatologists we love, who was my interviewer, it was like, okay, let's fix that. And then they actually fixed it. Like the psychiatry department reached out to Ethan, my partner, and they rescheduled his interview to be earlier so that he could get to know his department before I ranked my list. And so I feel like and Melissa made it very clear. She was like, I don't want you to be here but be unhappy. And she's like, you're not going to be here and be happy unless like your people are here, unless you feel like you're going to be comfortable here. And so I think that they really give you the tools to like make that decision. Yeah. And like acknowledging there are other things in your life besides medical training during your years of medical training. So I feel like that was a huge green flag for me when I was considering programs, that care had been taken. And then I think another thing that factored into my decision is I had like some idea of what I wanted to do or what I might want to do. And I really liked that Stanford, the health system, was situated like amongst the greater Stanford ecosystem of like graduate schools and undergrad school. And I was interested in exploring like device design and medical innovation and the people within the division doing that, and then the resources outside of the division for that are tremendous. And I also had a research and clinical interest in simulation and resuscitation, and there are like powerhouses for both within the Stanford group. And so it wasn't a terribly difficult decision at the end of the day. And I had also not been to California, but it's beautiful here. So yeah, those were kind of the things that I remember thinking about.
Yeah, I echo all of that. I thought about clinical experience. I certainly wanted a place that had cardiac or pre-cardiac babies and ECMO in the unit. And then I loved the opportunity here to review resuscitations and the robust simulation and NRP lab that they have, or CAPE lab that they have. And then as far as research, I certainly wanted to go somewhere with an ultrasound program, and connected with a mentor here and knew, I would really wanted to work with her. And it turned out to be great, and such a great opportunity that they've now shepherded me into, like that it can completely be my future. And then I would say the people. I was always taking notes on how I felt like everyone got along and treated one another, and the happiness level of the fellows that we interviewed with. And Stanford certainly stood out as like everyone just seemed to like genuinely like their job and like the experience here. And so that was probably the main, one of the main factors. And then being, in beautiful California, my husband and I just wanted to get out of the cold, and it was like COVID. And then I wanted to see, how another institution did things and gain additional experiences.
Yeah, I think Sheila, you had shared that you had a spreadsheet
Yes.
going into this process
Oh, yes.
and vibes.
The
and
vibes
people.
were good.
Vibes were high.
Yeah. I don't think I used the word vibes before I moved to California. Now it's become a part of my vocabulary. But if I could write it down now, I would say the vibes are good.
Yeah.
So
10 out of 10.
and it sounds like the vibes even perhaps exceeded your expectations.
Oh, far exceeded.
The vibes are
Yeah.
great.
Yes,
Yeah.
because we didn't know, you don't go, or you don't know who your co-fellows will be when you make your rank list. And so the fact that then we were matched with one another is probably the most exceptional gift of this whole process.
Yeah, that's true.
And our, the attendings, our mentorship here has been, I feel like we would not have been able to get that anywhere else.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. This class has been the best. Feel very lucky.
And did you mention that Wei Chen is the former fellowship
Yes.
program manager, and currently Asia is the program manager, and a lot of what Wei Chen put in place has been carried out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to talk about some of the specifics of the program for listeners who might be interested in applying. And I'm curious about how your responsibilities as clinicians have changed over the course of the last 3 years. Sheila?
Yeah, I can take a stab at this. So the program, where to start? So, obviously the goal of fellowship is to become an attending neonatologist. And I think the program does a nice job of giving us, what do they call it? Like
Graduated autonomy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Faith.
Graduated autonomy?
Yeah. So the further you go along, the more kind of responsibility and leeway and autonomy you're given in your decision making and your skill set. So we, kind of like all NICU programs have a mix of service and call. So your service weeks during the days are between 3 teams. So we have 3 service teams. We have our purple team, like Faith mentioned. So that's where our babies with cardiac conditions are pre-op, and sometimes we'll take them back post-op after they've been stabilized in the CVICU. Our blue team and red team have a similar patient population mix, but all of our pre-ECMO and ECMO babies go on blue team. Currently, our red team and our purple team are staffed by NPs, and our blue team staffed by residents. Every 6 months, the blue and the red staffing model switches. So residents will take red and NPs will take blue.
And sorry, what's the red team? What makes that distinct?
It's kind of the same as blue team, except there's no ECMO. So you're going to have your preemies, your kids with surgical conditions. One thing that makes Stanford a little bit unique is that we'll take kids who have been discharged home and get readmitted to the hospital for whatever reason. And those kids can go on any of the 3 teams.
We usually try to put the micro preemies with the NNPs just because they have more experience than residents that may not be interested in neonatology. So we put the really small babies with the NNP teams. So sometimes red right now is more of the preemie babies.
Yeah, that's a good point. And right now our mostly our kids on dialysis are on the blue team. Not always, but often. So when you're on service during the day, you, as the junior fellow will cover one of the either red or blue team and the purple team. And the senior fellow will cover the resident team. You go on rounds with the attending. Kind of the further along you get in your training, your attending may or may not always join you on rounds. And it's nice to be able to talk stuff over with them, but kind of round on your own and lead rounds if they get pulled away. And then after rounds, you do all the things you would normally do. Take care of kids, update families, go to deliveries, do procedures. One thing that I think is a little unique is that we don't take call when we're on service. So we have very, very few true 24-hour shifts in the NICU. So our calls are all done in between service weeks. You're on at night with an attending in-house, though I do actually think the vast majority of our attendings leave us alone until they're needed. So I never really feel like they're kind of stepping on my toes or trying to tell me what to do. And then you're on with 3 frontline providers. So usually 2 NPs, or I should say APPs, advanced practice providers, because sometimes we have hospitalists too, and 1 resident. We do night rounds that the attendings don't go to. So you really are expected to lead the team and review all the plans. And you're not first call for anything except for ECMO, fellows frontline ECMO. But certainly you're working with the team all night for things like admissions and kids who have issues that come up.
Yeah, and I think that makes Stanford a little bit different, that we don't do call during service time. So our calls are always separate, like when we're not on service. So it can break up your time a little bit differently, whereas like some institutions, you're on service for 3 weeks and have all your calls during that time and then have 3 weeks to dedicate towards your research. We would have our other time, interspersed with call shifts. And so you have to be a little bit more organized and like, how am I going to do the research this week? When am I going to have meetings and things like that? Because you can't, or you don't have just a huge chunk of protected time unless you arrange it. We make our own schedule, so you can arrange it prior. Like, okay, I really want a month off at a time for my research. So that is possible with a busier.
And when do you get your schedules, Faith? Like how far in advance?
Like a couple months usually.
So then you'll know I'm on call these nights, and then you'll be able to plan accordingly for research.
Yeah.
And what is I don't know if you guys know this, but what's the thinking behind like separating the service from the call?
I feel like just because our calls are very busy, so it could get, when other places do, you're on service, then you stay at night, and then you even sometimes around the next day with the team. We're most often up all night, so that would just become
and I think
much
it's
too exhausting.
Also, so that we have continuity for our service weeks, so that we don't need to take call round and then leave the next morning. You're actually there the whole day. Every day you're on service. And we do our service weeks in 1 or 2 week chunks. Just it kind of mimics the attending schedule where they typically do their service weeks in 1 or 2 week chunks. And so it kind of feels like our schedule is trying to mimic the schedule of an academic neonatologist, to give us a sense of like, how might you need to be able to manage your time should you choose to go down that route. And I do think within while we're clinically on service and on call in the NICU, you do get the opportunity to have a leadership role in the NICU in a way that I've really appreciated. So like in the morning when we have board rounds and talk about everyone in the NICU, who's coming in and who could go where, like the fellow is the one who leads that. The fellow is the point of contact with the OB team. So we're the first generally to know if there's a baby being admitted from L&D. And then when our attendings get calls about admissions from the outside, we're typically the first or the second person they call. So it does feel like you kind of get to have the experience of leading and organizing a unit, which I think is a really key with we built.
Yeah. And go ahead, Faith.
Probably the most challenging with the transition from residency to fellowship, one of the most challenging aspects is that you now have to manage people, and you're not as used to that as a resident. You're more like only doing patient work, whereas then you have to go into this role where you're managing teams and people, and it's just a different skill set to have.
Say more on that.
Maybe Sheila, I don't want to, if you were going to say something similar.
Yeah, no, I do think, I didn't realize this when I was applying to fellowship, but I think having been a fellow here at Stanford, I do really feel like we have a fellow-led unit. Like we do feel really essential to kind of the everyday workings of the unit, especially because we are having a fellow retreat for the first time ever this year, where there are going to be no fellows in the unit on day shift or at night. And it's been fun to watch people panic a little about not having us. It's been a good ego boost because sometimes, especially when you start, you run around just thinking, what am I doing? But I do actually feel like we help, exactly like Faith said. Like we're the ones who know what's coming in from L&D. we hear from the attendings about who's coming in transport wise, and it's our responsibility to assign which admission goes to which patient team. So we are kind of very involved on like the systems level issues. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think one of the transitions, so I did a chief year between residency and fellowship. So some of the people managing skills were definitely something I worked on chief year. But it is different because you're not just thinking about your patients and what your patients need, which we're still doing as fellows, but you have to kind of think about what makes the unit run. And I think that prepares you well to be an attending.
It seems like you're also interacting with other departments like L&D and transport and, so you sort of have an eye on these other aspects.
For sure.
And people within those.
Yeah. And even staffing, like we have to, with the charge nurse, have to take into consideration staffing. If L&D says, we have a mom who's carrying triplets and now she's like bleeding, so maybe we're gonna have to deliver these babies, then we have to tell the charge nurse that's a possibility, and then so we have to give bad news sometimes too for staffing.
I will say, I think, because something that I asked a lot when I was applying for fellowship is kind of like, what type of training do you not get? And so, to be transparent, something that we don't do as fellows typically is med control. So when other units call to transfer their babies, those calls almost always go through the attending. Kind of an example of the graduated autonomy that we were talking about earlier is, initially I think as a first year, the attendings took the calls and then told me about what they heard. But as I got further and further along in fellowship, we should be sitting in on those calls and helping participate in them. So it is something that we learn, but it's not a responsibility that is solely ours like it is at other units sometimes. And then transport too. So we are not expected to go out on transports. I think at least a couple of us have done transport electives, and that's definitely an option, but we are not the ones going out on transports. We have transport nurses to do that. So little unique parts of the program.
Yeah.
I do think that there is a fair amount of self-reflection. Like I completely agree, transport is an area that we might not get as much exposure to as some of the other neonatal fellowships. But I feel like we've recognized that. And especially in the last year or so, our program has been trying to brainstorm ways to get us the more exposure or experience. So like making it systematic that maybe as third year fellows, you sit in on these calls or you try to kind of manage these calls, simulated transport experiences. Like we've been able to be involved in those in the last year or so, and it's actually been really helpful. Like I found them really helpful. And then having like transport electives where we actually go with our nurse transport specialists, who are the ones who do the transports here, to see what it's like to pick up a critically ill baby from another hospital and how to manage that baby on the way back. And so I think it's absolutely true that we don't do as much as others. But I feel like we've recognized that, and we're kind of trying to work on how do we make sure that we graduate with being competent in all the areas that we need to be competent in.
Yeah, and I feel like fellowship also compared to residency is more of like a choose your own adventure if you know what you're going to do after. So if you're like, I'm going to go somewhere where I'm going to, be the one going on transports, they will certainly work with you to cater your fellowship to that experience. And like whatever you need, there's time to do all of that. And so you can always have experiences or more in-depth experiences with what you need, because we have so much flexibility and time with the schedule.
Yeah. And with that choose your own adventure, were you able to reflect with faculty at the end of each year of fellowship and say like, here's something that I want to get more experience in doing in the NICU?
Yeah, even twice a year we have like formal sit downs with them and talk about what we need or what we've done and goals for the next 6 months. But certainly at any time, if you're like, now I'm thinking I'm going to take this position after, can you help me gain more experience in this area? And they would certainly work with you.
For someone coming into fellowship, what's like a piece of advice that you would give them to be successful as a fellow in the Stanford clinical environment? Sheila?
Yeah. Okay, so I think there are two pieces of advice that come to mind like right away. One is to ask for feedback often. So I am a big believer in setting expectations and then in doing feedback. And so every time I start on service, I try to do expectation setting with the residents. And then I also like to sit down with the attending at some point that day and ask what their expectations are and then tell them what I'm trying to work on that week. Whether it's like procedural, like at the beginning of third year, I have been very lucky and I have not done many chest tubes. So it's like lucky for the babies, not lucky for me. And I made that really clear to everyone. Like, hey guys, if any baby in the unit needs a chest tube, even if they're not on my team, please let me do it or let me help or let me be a part of it. And I think by like really clearly stating your learning goals, it's more likely that people are going to look out for you when those things come up. And then my second piece of advice would be kind of what Faith was saying earlier, right? Like the point is to prepare us to be attendings. So really think of yourself as the leader of the team and work on leadership skills, how to run rounds, how to delegate, how to triage. I think just as much as the procedural skills and the fund of knowledge that we all need to grow on, like learning how to effectively lead a team is a huge part of fellowship.
Yeah.
And then I feel like the advice I give to people coming in is like your role as a learner, I think really changes throughout your fellowship. And I think one of the attendings gave me the advice that when you're new, like you really want to be in it. You want to be at the bedside. You want to be with the frontline providers, making the decisions. And then kind of as you progress through your fellowship, you like start to take a bit of a step back and see if you can manage things from a little bit afar, like learn who you can trust and move in that way. And I think one of the key points in first year is just learn from everyone, learn from everything, right? So like every single person that you encounter in the unit has something they could teach you. Mm-hmm. And then when you have the highest clinical burden, which is first year, making sure that every time you get a blood gas, you're at the baby's bedside, you're at the ventilator, you're learning from the nurse, from the respiratory therapists, from the NNPs, from your attendings, just like it, like seeing the learning opportunities that might not be like broadcast as this is a learning opportunity, but the respiratory therapist who has been working in a NICU for 20 years like knows a ventilator. Yeah, right. And I think it's learning that plus reading about pulmonary mechanics, which is I think how the like breadth of neonatology knowledge is like really gets learned and taught. And so I encourage everyone coming in that like everyone in the unit can teach you.
Yeah. And like great. Melissa said, or, Dr. Melissa Scala, our program director, I still remember in orientation, she said, the first 6 months of neonatology fellowship, your job is to be a sponge. Your job is try to absorb everything around you, take it all in. And yeah, I totally agree. It's about like being there with the babies at the bedside and learning from everyone around you.
Yeah. And the sponge analogy can sometimes be like you're just going to learn everything if you just like are around, which you probably will learn enough, but I still think being proactive and being like, okay, I'm going to go with this person to watch them how, or like this NNP does procedures a certain way and I'm going to go learn what she does and take notes on it and then go like the next time it happens observe and work with another one to see how they do it and then see how you can get your style as well going forward. And being proactive because maybe even a little bit there's less support or not hand-holding, but less like so many certain requirements compared to residency. Fellowship is more free range, however, or like more adult learning, and that means you have to be more proactive with
definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely think that this fellowship is an adult learning model. Like everyone is expecting you to show up as an adult learner. So if you sit there, no one's gonna hand you a syllabus and be like, read this, learn this, learn this on this day. But it's kind of up to you to be like, okay, this is what I want to focus on today. And the resources are always there. Like if you ask anyone to teach you, mentor you, guide you, like the answer is always going to be yes. And there's always people. Right. It's just, we do rely on ourselves to be a little proactive.
Self-directed.
Yes. Totally.
Yeah. I think that's a good lead into, talking about research, because it sounds like in terms of the scheduling, you have to be pretty self-directed with that as well. So yeah, talk to me a little bit more about the balance between, clinical time and then research and education within the program. Hannah?
I can start with this one.
Great.
I feel like this goes back to the theme of kind of your role as a learner changes through fellowship, because I would say definitely in the first 6 months, but particularly the first year, I think your role is to figure out how to be a NICU fellow. And you have more clinical time your first year too, so you're just in the unit more. But I would say that there are fairly clear kind of research expectations that we are expected to meet as fellows. And we have, like Faith mentioned, twice a year meetings with our program directors, and then twice a year meetings also with our SOC, or kind of our research mentorship team, which we're supposed to form our first year, to make sure that we're meeting the goals of the fellowship and then also the goals that we've set for ourselves. And so I would say in the first year, I think our main goal was kind of figure out exactly who we're going to be working with from a research mentorship perspective, and try to clarify more directly kind of what project or what area we're going to be focused in. And then one of the requirements of fellowship for us is to write and submit a grant application so that we get that experience. And then there's the opportunity within Stanford to apply for an internal MCHRI grant that many of us do as a first or a second year. So it kind of, I know we just said there's not as much structure, but that is an opportunity for structure where there's kind of like a timeline and guidance and kind of grant workshops and things that you can do. And then as you kind of form that team, I feel like there is more time second year when you are less clinically busy to really develop your projects, do the things that you set out you were going to do in your grant application that you submitted your first year. And then kind of tie those things up third year as we then move to looking for a job, which actually takes a good amount of time too of our third year. So I think it really changes. And then like we've mentioned previously, with some of our interests changing and like project changing, and particularly different mentorship people or teams through the year, there's kind of flux and flow through that as well. But I would say, so specifically I started out and I kind of wanted to explore the area of device design or medical innovation. So I had a project where I looked more closely at CPAP belly. And so I focused on that through the first couple years of my fellowship. I did like a background study, published a paper, and actually just this morning, someone who's working on a device to address CPAP belly emailed me from my paper. And so like there's like things like that
That's
that
so
kind of
cool.
continue moving forward. And then there's just like I don't know how I spend my time. There's so much to do. There's just like a lot to do. And so then like in second year, we also like we are all expected to become like NRP instructors. And so we all of us spend a good amount of time in the simulation lab, like learning how to teach neonatal resuscitation and then going on to teach it more. And I've been involved in some of the really interesting simulation research we've been doing out of that lab too. So seeing if we can actually determine what expert intubators do that's different from what novice intubators do, because neonatal intubation is, I think, a touchy subject and a holy grail for everyone within the field of neonatology. So trying to think if there's a way that we can teach this procedural skill in like a more data-driven or thoughtful way than we're teaching it now, in order to maximize our decreasing learning opportunities in a clinical setting. And if there are tools or devices that might help us along that journey. Those are some of the questions I've been playing around in my head, which we luckily have a lot of time to do a lot of different things.
That study, I participated or was one of the subjects, and you literally have to wear gloves and glasses that have a bunch of sensors on it, and they track where your eyes point and then what force you're applying to the laryngoscope, and it was very cool. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah,
and it seems
she's
like
not doing it justice how cool this
Yeah.
research is with Dr. Halamek and Dr. Yamada's lab.
Yeah, I mean, you had mentioned, Faith, earlier that simulation is one of the unique Stanford experiences, and I think that bears repeating. We really do. I know have a strong program with CAPE and with Dr. Halamek and
even with super complex exit procedures, or we know a very complex delivery is going to take place. There's opportunity to then simulate it ideally with the team that's going to be there beforehand in their lab and get feedback on it, and it's incredible.
No, I cannot say enough wonderful things about our simulation program and group and the support that we have. So for those who are interested in simulation, I feel like it is just such an incredible tool for our own education, an incredible tool to learn how to be teachers. And then I feel like the group here with Dr. Halamek and Dr. Yamada take it one step further, and it really is like a basic science lab to study parts of neonatology that you can't study clinically, right? Like there are, right now we can't gear everybody up in sensors to intubate emergently if I have a grand baby in the NICU. And so if people are interested in that, it's a really wonderful place to train and learn with really wonderful mentorship and people who care about you.
Also, if you're not that interested in simulation, I didn't go into fellowship thinking that was an area of focus, but I have since become a CAPE groupie, as I proudly tell them. Because they do incredible work. And I do think it is a really important part of our education that you won't necessarily get everywhere. To be able to sim, we go to sims, which is the fellows. We have counsel sims where we practice having challenging conversations with families and delivering bad news. We do multidisciplinary sims where we get to go through scenarios with our nurse practitioners, with nurses, with respiratory therapists. And like Faith said, for some of our really complex fetal cases, we've done kind of walkthroughs and sims with the OB and the CV anesthesia team and the ENT team all there at the same time. So
we have ECMO
really cool.
sim. They
even,
ECMO set up
sim.
this very realistic ECMO circuit and went through ECMO emergencies with us, and it was excellent education.
And then Faith mentioned this too, but the same group, we have resuscitations that happen in our OR, real live resuscitations recorded. And then once a month we do video review of and we talk about teamwork dynamics, what went well, what could go better next time. And I just feel like it just doubles and triples your learning opportunities, because you get to see, you're not going to do everything in a 3-year neonatology fellowship that you're going to do in your entire career as a neonatologist. So I feel like you get to learn from everyone's opportunities and everyone's experiences too. And I think it's really, really valuable.
Yeah, and it's great learning as well to instruct these courses and help, peds ED, any EM resident and any pediatric resident has to be NRP certified. And so to be part of that.
And the OB residents.
Oh, and the
I
OB
did
residents.
OB
yes.
intern NRP this year.
So we help instruct those courses, and through, after learning from CAPE and how they debrief in a certain way,
I love
made converts of all of us.
I love how the question about
that
research turned
into
we love CAPE.
Yeah. We love CAPE.
He's going to be thrilled.
He's going to be so excited.
That's so true.
He's going to love this.
I will. Okay, I'll pivot just a little bit. Just a little bit. Because I also think in terms of research and opportunities at Stanford, one thing that is unique is that we are the CPQCC home. So the California Perinatal Quality Care Collaborative was founded by Dr. Jeff Gold, who's one of the Stanford attendings. He no longer practices clinically, but is still certainly around for mentorship. And then now Dr. Jochen Prophet has taken over the helm. And it's been really amazing to go to conferences and people are like, oh, you get to work with CPQCC data. And I'm like, I didn't realize going into fellowship how big of a deal it was. And then they actually have a huge, super robust data set if you want to do outcomes research, any sort of health services research. They gather data from over 90% of the state's NICUs. So the data set is just massive, and it's generalizable because it's the whole state. And so I feel like the same way that Hannah has been able to like so take advantage of all the amazing thing CAPE does, I feel like I've been so fortunate to be able to kind of mesh myself in CPQCC work.
Yeah. And also the whole CPQCC staff is here too. So
exactly.
the biostatisticians and the leadership within CPQCC and CMQCC is also here.
The maternal side.
Yeah. I think it's a great resource and
it's awesome. And it's something I think like very few programs have such close access to because all of the leadership is here at Stanford.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Dr. Henry Lee used to be here, and so we've gotten to know him well. He has left, but yeah, then we go places and people are like, you know Dr. Lee? And I'm like, oh, I didn't know he was so famous.
It is funny. People like at conferences will be like, oh, you get to work with Dr. Hlamek. Like, oh my gosh, you've worked with Dr. Chalk. Like, we get
to introduce them.
Yeah.
You have a groupie over here.
Yeah.
We are their groupies.
Yeah. But I do think that I wasn't expecting to come to fellowship and develop such close relationships with our attendings. Like,
So
I feel like I love our attending group, and they're like very approachable and they really do want us to succeed. Like, I feel that they want us to succeed in the ways that we want to succeed.
Yeah.
Like, I did not. So one of my primary mentors is Dr. Janine Furch, and I absolutely adore her. And she's one of my favorite humans on this planet. And she is like an absolute like device innovator, biodesign powerhouse.
Yes.
And so I started working with her, and my career trajectory is certainly not going to exactly follow hers. But she has always advocated for me in every step of the way. And I know that like when I graduate and move on, I am going to stay in very close contact with her and really all of the other attendings that we've worked with. Like, it's just, I just didn't realize how fortunate I was going to be to develop like such close connections with the like my mentors and the people I'm learning from here.
Yeah. Talk to me more about that. All three of you are women, and Sheila mentioned that being supported, especially by all the faculty, but especially by the female faculty, has been really an important piece of your fellowship experience. And so I'd love to hear more about that. So even if they're not your direct mentors, you know, we have so many amazing women in neonatology.
Yes. Yeah. So, and we should mention, we all get assigned a primary research mentor and then our SOC, but we also we don't get assigned, we choose our research mentors, sorry. We also get to choose a clinical mentor. And apart from our clinical mentor, I totally agree with what Hannah said. The faculty in general are just so available and approachable and are incredible mentors. But my clinical mentor is Dr. Lisa Bain, and she's the most incredible human. And I completely owe her for dealing with all of my panicked texts and emails and phone calls about the job search process. It's been so incredible, I think, to have such strong women physicians lead our group. Our medical director is a woman, Dr. Alexis Davis. She's also the incoming chair of the AAP section on neonatal-perinatal medicine. So she's a national leader, but also makes so much time to just chat with us. And we had a graduation dinner last night. She gifted us a lovely book, Letters to a Young Female Physician.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's truly been amazing to speak with women who understand kind of the unique dynamics of being a woman in a leadership position in an ICU setting, where there are times where you have to be direct and you have to be clear. And sometimes you have to raise your voice to be heard above the loud noises of a code. So to have them lead by example, and then also to pick their brains about how to most effectively lead and deal with people's, implicit biases about how women should act, has just been so huge. They're just the best mentors. And I totally agree. Even if your clinical interests or research interests don't overlap with them at all, they're so, so willing to take you under their wing.
Yeah, and I think that so women in neonatology there's like a very strong contingent from Stanford, and I feel like watching the women of our division support each other has just been absolutely huge, and watch them support like the trainees like us has just been like, this is something that I want to model. Like, this is something that I want to continue in my future. Like, building this type of support system is just so valuable. And just having people to text when you're like not feeling sure about clinical decisions, or when you're really stressed out about finding a job. Like, we joke that Dr. Nicole Yamada, who is also like a Cape warrior, should get protected FTE for just being our like personal
Emotional support.
like emotional support. Because like, she's the person I text when I'm like, oh my gosh, like as a second year I missed a tube, I may not know how to intubate, and she will walk you through it. And it's just,
and we should add that she was a fellow here herself.
Yes,
so.
she was a fellow here herself too. And so it's just like having that support and having
like we were invited to dinner at one of the female physicians' home, and it was like all the women in the division came, and just like seeing their friendship and support for one another certainly is like something I would aspire to like have in my future workplace, because they're just incredibly supportive of one another and can text each other for anything. And I think it just shows like you can be in any workplace, and even if there's some aspects that you don't like, if you have a positive group, like specifically of female or other female physicians around you, it can very much get you through anything.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I'll add, the men in our division,
they're also wonderful.
Are wonderful too, because I don't want them to get their feelings hurt if they listen. Like, we've already talked about how obsessed we are with Dr. Helbig and Dr. Prophet. But like, Dr. Anoop Rao is a relatively early career attending physician who trained here for fellowship. And he also takes such an interest in mentoring us. Like, if you run into him in the hallway in CAM, which is where our offices are, no matter if you're late to something, if he's late to something, he will stop and talk to you about where you're at with your clinical training, where you're at with your job search.
So true.
And the best educator.
He
is just an exceptional educator. Yes. Yeah. I want him to like personally teach a boards prep course.
Yeah. I would pay for that.
Yeah. He was just so supportive and amazing.
Yeah. And Dr. John Reese.
Yes, I was
Dr.
going to say yes.
He was a third-year fellow when we started, and was the best role model and constantly took care of us and made sure we were fed. And now is an attending here, and is just the best. And it's so nice to have a near peer in the attending role here, because he very much remembers what it was like and has gone through everything just 2 years before us. And so it's not to say the guys aren't great. They are great. But I am especially grateful to have such strong female role models in the division.
If you think about all of our faculty, are there any nuggets of wisdom that they've shared with you, like similar to what you were giving as like what future fellows would need to be successful in the unit? Like, have they imparted any wisdom to you about what you might need to be successful as attendings?
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot of it, I think, has like been sprinkled through the years of like working on clinical service together, and like just like being able to discuss little pain points that have come up through the years. Like, I remember Dr. Valerie Chalk, who is our APD and just like an absolutely wonderful human being, and learning from her kind of skills of like leading from a place of quiet, maybe, and like maybe if you're not the biggest presence or the personality in the room, like how to still command that situation, that code, how to make sure that like boundaries are set. And I really, really look to her for that, because she like is a powerhouse and a Wonder Woman. And I think it's like things like that, where you like identify your role models and you get advice about certain things that
and can go to them to get advice on just confidence, or how they'll help you feel more self-assured and find ways to break habits of like self-deprecating yourself or things like that, where they just very much give advice of how to see yourself as a leader and that you can do this.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, so like Lisa or Dr. Bain, we call all of our attendings by their first name. I'm just trying to sound professional by reminding our listeners that they are physicians. But I think one thing that Lisa has really helped me do is like focus on what my goals are. Because like Hannah mentioned earlier, there are a million things happening at Stanford, and you could be working 24 hours a day and still not take advantage of all the opportunities. And I've talked to her about saying like, well, I have this project going on, and then I was thinking about signing up for this, and I don't know, maybe I should do that. And she has always stopped me and asked like, Sheila, what is it that you want to do? Mm-hmm. What are your goals? It doesn't matter what this person wants you to be involved in. Do you want to be involved in that? Like I think learning how to say no is such an important skill that I am continuing to mostly fail at.
Yeah.
But
hear that.
It is helpful to have attendings who are, you know, well established in their career tell you that it's okay to say no. Because I think for someone like me, who is somewhat of a people pleaser, especially, you know, the people I respect and look up to in the unit, having someone say it's okay to say no and kind of protect your own time and well-being has been really helpful.
Yeah. And knowing like your worth, they'll talk to us a lot about knowing our worth and value when we go forward into the world so that we can get the job that most aligns with our missions.
Yeah. And just on the getting the job front, because I feel like that's like fresh in all of our minds. Like I really feel like our faculty have gone to bat for us this year. Like calling people they know in the places that we're applying. Like they like we don't have to ask. They just do it.
They like definitely got all of us our jobs by just connect, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we would have gotten it without them, but I feel strongly that they were a big part in helping and just connecting with the people at those institutions that we wanted to work at.
Yeah. And I think it started way before the like traditional job application season. Like I think one thing Stanford does really well is that we go to a ton of conferences, like to the point that sometimes other people laugh at us.
And you all just went to PAS 2024. So you're just getting back from that in Toronto.
Yes, which was super fun. But it's nice because like we don't have a limit of how many conferences we can go to. So if we're presenting at them, or if they're like relevant to our career, Stanford will pay for us to go. And there are certain conferences like PAS your second year, like no questions asked. You should be there because it's a great networking opportunity. CAN, which is the center, or what is CAN? California Association of Neonatologists. Second year, they have a workshop called Life After Fellowship that they make sure we all go to, even if we're not presenting. So Faith presented last year. But Hannah and I did not, and we still attended and were able to get time to do that.
Have to.
No, you were great though. You were one of the speakers.
Yes, she had a poster and a presentation. But that has been really huge for networking and meeting people and getting your name out there. And our attending support us in that and are happy to make introductions to anyone, or if we see them like at a talk or whatever, and they're talking to people, they will say, "Hey, have you met my fellow?" They're really, really good about, you know, spotlighting us and helping us build our NICU community.
Yeah. Hannah went to Portugal?
Yeah.
Yes. So as part of the simulation, so yes, the International Pediatric Simulation Society alternates their conferences in the United States and Europe every other year. So I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to present some of my work in Lisbon, which was a phenomenal experience. And I got to hang out with Dr. Luhalamic and the rest of the crew in Lisbon, which was amazing.
Laura, you thought you were going to have us talk about our fellowship experience, but we're actually just like CAPE sponsored. It's just one big CAPE advertisement.
Lou's gonna love it.
Yeah.
You really will.
There's a ultrasound conference in France that they really wanted me to go to. I was like postpartum and didn't want to be so far. But yeah, I could have gone abroad for ultrasound probably 2 years in a row. And like there's no limit. and it's kind of crazy. They probably don't want us to advertise this. They're gonna.
No, it's great.
Because like other institutions have a set amount of CME.
But I think the support for our work though, because it's like if you do work and you're kind of sharing it and networking, like I think it's really lovely to have that acknowledgement that like we actually do a lot of work.
And you've all, as far as I'm aware, right, you've done oral presentations at conferences, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's amazing too. I don't know how common that is for fellows, maybe somewhat.
Yeah, I don't know how common it is, but I feel very lucky to train with these women and the rest of the fellows in our program. I do feel like I'm just constantly in awe of all the awards people are winning and papers they're publishing.
Yeah, people do. We do a lot. We do a lot here. Yeah,
you do a lot. Yeah, I mean, my perception has always been that the three of you are very close. As a class.
Has that come across yet?
Which is great, I think, and adds to what you were saying, Faith, earlier about like, finding the right people and knowing that you can get through things if you have that support. And so, can you tell me a little bit more about the bond that the three of you share and how it's been to go through the experience together these last 3 years?
Okay, you're like gonna make me cry.
I will say you also don't go into fellowship knowing who your co-fellows will be. You can interview and you meet the people that will be a year above you or like 2 years above you on the interview trail, but then, in the fellowship interviews, but you don't really know who's going to be with you in your starting class. So it's like pure luck that we...
But I will say, yes, in general, like I feel like, and Melissa Scala says this too, like when we think about like fellow recruitment or like building our fellow class, like we're a relatively small group, right? So there's only 3 per year. So there's only 9 of us at any one given time. And I really love everyone in our program. Like, so I think that I think it was luck that we are like built a very strong bond with each other.
Yeah, I don't know how I got so lucky. Yes. I did actually remember Hannah and I interviewed at Stanford together.
We did interview at Stanford together.
Yes. For fellowship?
Yeah.
Yes, we were in the same Zoom.
Right. I was going to say, when you all interviewed, it was height of COVID. So.
Yes.
It was.
Wildfires.
Yeah, everything was virtual. But I remember Hannah was very smiley. That's what I remember.
Yes, I do smile a lot.
But I mean, truly the best part of fellowship has been doing it with you guys.
Yeah. No, it's been so wonderful.
Yeah, they asked us last night at our graduation dinner. They're like, why do you feel like your class has been built such a bond? We, I don't know, brainstorm. We don't have family here.
I do think we all came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yes. None of us did residency or medical school at Stanford. And so had that in common. And then also, because we didn't have much of a support system here, leaned on each other a great deal.
Yeah.
Yes.
And our partners all get along.
Yes.
And love each other very much too. And so that made things easy.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you guys are just really awesome people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I said they're just both so normal. For some reason in medicine, if you say normal, people just know what you mean. Like, that person's legit.
No, but it's nice to have like a built-in, because like when you're going through, like a lot of parts of medical training can be really tough, and a lot of parts of being a neonatology fellow can be tough, right? Like there are hard things in the unit. It's a very, very steep learning curve. You're like navigating interpersonal things, and just having like 2 built-in people where you can like immediately text them and be like, what's happening?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we
like,
FaceTime,
so nice.
Group FaceTime, even things that happen in the unit where we're stressed out.
Yeah.
And certainly during the job application process, we leaned on each other a great deal.
Yes. Like I do feel like when when something good happens to one of us, it happens to like all of us.
Yeah.
Like we experience
it's
it
like
together.
a joy. We call ourselves a blob.
Yeah. We do like to...
The best fellowship days are days where at least more than one of us is in the unit. We can do things together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did the blob as a name come about?
I think it started, there's one time first year in the spring when Hannah and I were on service together. And so typically our service schedule is such that you have one junior fellow and one senior fellow on. But in the spring, once you have, a few months under your belt, because the first years do more service time than the other classes, there are weeks where it's 2 first years on service together. And I think Hannah and I were obviously on different teams and had different roles and responsibilities, but yet we tried to travel together.
Yeah, it's just more fun.
It's more fun that way. And I think that's where the blob started.
Yeah, but also like we want to do the same learning opportunities. So
Right.
like when Faith comes into the unit, because she's like a POCUS queen to do ultrasound, I just like glom onto her. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the ultrasound
Yeah, I'm going
too.
to follow you around.
Like learn
You can
also
just hang
how
out.
to do ultrasound.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love doing lines together. It's like the
Yes.
best ever when we get to do lines together.
Such a
With
treat.
one or the other
Or if one
person.
of us is dealing with a complex fetal delivery and they need extra hands,
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Faith is there. I want to be there.
Yeah.
And for the learning
Yes,
purposes.
learning too. Yes, learning together.
Yeah.
Always.
I came in with Sheila for a complex, and it was so fun because
Yeah.
we just got to do some chest tubes together.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah.
Nice.
The babies are okay too.
Yeah, the babies
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
The babies are doing
I think you came in once for one of my complex deliveries too. We were doing like a cardiac straight from OR to OR.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that was fun
We
too.
do a lot of
And with the
things
new.
together. Yeah.
So yeah, so it sounds like the three of you are very, very close and enjoy learning from each other at work. The blob moves around campus. Does it move around outside of campus?
Yeah, all the time.
Yes. We spend a lot of time together.
In
Not
Toronto.
at work.
Yeah.
Yes, at conferences.
Yeah. But like we probably see each other once a week, once every other week with
Yeah,
our
at
families.
least. Yeah.
Like for dinner or out and about. I think it's nice, despite the fact that we have service time and we have calls, I feel like we've really prioritized hanging out with each other.
So Faith, you had mentioned that all of you didn't do medical school or residency at Stanford, and you all came here from the East Coast or the Midwest. And so can you talk to me a little bit about what it's been like coming to California and how you the challenges and the benefits of Bay Area living?
Yes, it is very expensive and it is very beautiful. And I think all of us were very wowed by just how pretty like the campus is and then everything around too. When we first got here, the third year class at that time had organized like a get to know you thing before we started orientation, and it was a hike up the dish, and it was like on campus, and so I was like, oh, it's like a afternoon walk. It was a hike. Like
Yeah.
it was a real hike.
We were not dressed appropriately.
Yes. But it was so beautiful. Like you're on campus, you go like walk up this dish. There were like wild turkeys. You get like a whole view of the bay,
Yeah.
and I was like, where am I?
Yeah.
It's like unbelievable.
But it is
Everywhere you look.
Yes, it is expensive. So I live in Palo Alto with my partner who is a psychiatry resident. We moved from Philadelphia where we paid much less for rent, and now we pay much more for rent. But it is still doable on like a double trainee salary. So I can just be open about like where I live and what we paid. So we live on like a little downtown like strip on California Avenue in like a 2-bed 2-bath condo. We pay like $4,000 a month for rent, which is like not terrible. I think we moved still mid-pandemic where prices were a little bit lower, and our landlord's just been generous and not raised the rent too much on us during the time we've been there. But we've stayed there all 3 years. We love it.
Yeah, and you live on such a cool street.
It
Right.
is. It is nice. I still can. So it is quite. It has a suburban feel, I would say, like the area around Stanford. But we can walk to restaurants, and we bike most places. So it's been nice to still keep that component of city living.
And you're not that far from San Francisco or San Jose.
True.
Yeah.
It does always it does feel like a different world down here, but truly San Francisco is just an hour.
Yes.
away.
And we have our Caltrain passes covered.
The Clipper card.
The Clipper card.
Yes.
So I've used it for commuting, and I've used it for fun too. So coming up to the city.
Yeah, we pay a little bit more than that. I think it's like $4,500, but it's 2 bed and 2.5 bath so my daughter has a room, like we have a little bit more space. But yeah, we could probably never afford to buy anything in this area. Yeah, you would have to rent for a while. But Stanford does give a good housing stipend.
Yeah, in addition to our salary.
And our salary is certainly more than anywhere else that I interviewed. So they have adjusted at least a little bit for the cost of living here, and it feels doable.
What's the stipend? Does it change every year?
It does. It goes up every year. And then with unionization, I think it went up more, but I don't remember what it is.
Yes. And we did just unionize. So things like the high cost of living of the area and other things that could potentially make a trainee's life more difficult have been taken into consideration.
Unionization is for all
trainees,
fellows,
so residents and
graduates.
fellows.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to lie. It is exactly like you guys said. It's super expensive. Similar to Faith, my husband has a real job. So that has been very helpful in being able to afford living here. So we live in Sunnyvale. So like I said, I do a bit of a commute in order to pay less in rent. When we moved in, we were paying about $2,900 for a 2-bed, 2-bath. And our rent has gone up. It's now $3,400. But again, if you're willing to drive, 20, 30 minutes a day, you can definitely knock off a few $100s per month on your rent. So it's doable.
A car culture here.
It is a car culture here. This is my first time driving to work. I've always lived in cities where I've been walking distance from work. So that, it's an adjustment that I was willing to make in order to pay less money. I will say, it is super expensive. I grew up in Baltimore. I trained in St. Louis. So this was definitely sticker shock. There are a ton of benefits, though. And I can somewhat see why it costs so much to live here. Like, truly, the weather is gorgeous. Yeah. Being able to go to the ocean, being able to go to Napa for a day trip if you wanted. Just the incredible food that is in the South Bay. So I'm Indian American. Sunnyvale has, the best Indian food out of anywhere I've ever lived. And there's every kind of Indian food you can want. So the diversity, the kind of acceptance of all different cultures living here in California has been really, really great. So it's totally converted us from people who have never lived in California before. And now I think my husband will refuse to live anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's been awesome.
The weather is addicting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Little humidity.
Yeah.
Coming from Minnesota, there's only snow when you want to go to snow. So we went skiing twice this winter at Tahoe, but other than that, you don't have to deal with snow.
Right? Yeah.
Especially with cars and commuting. Right. It's just so amazing.
You don't have to clean off your car and turn it on so it gets warm.
Yeah. And you can go on a walk every single day. You can be outside and go on a walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember after Faith, you had your baby and you were still on maternity leave. We lived close enough that sometimes you'd come over and we'd go for walks around the neighborhood. And yeah, it was lovely. Yeah.
My favorite pastime.
Yeah. And I do feel like a lot of similarly sized institutions are in cities. And I was pretty nervous about moving to the suburbs for the first time since growing up as a child and being in the suburbs. But there are definite perks to being in the suburbs. Being able to access 2 Costco's in a 15-minute radius is pretty incredible. Costco gas also makes living here more affordable. Just the grocery stores and libraries and everything being kind of easy to get to. It does help a little bit in terms of running errands on a tight schedule.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's more suburbia than I was expecting, but then there are great perks to it. And still because there's so many people, there's still a lot going on, but stuff you have to get more in tune with the California lifestyle of going to bed early and sleeping in late, because I feel like those are the hours of places here. They no one gets up early, or apparently no one stays out late.
You can tell we're not from
here.
Yeah.
And I'm just not used to that.
I definitely felt the not staying things not being open late was an adjustment. Coming from New York
City,
that is
a huge adjustment. Yes.
Yeah.
And then if you go somewhere at 9 a.m., you're like the only one there. And it's like, wow, this is awesome.
I think everyone's out hiking.
That's
Maybe.
true. It's
I think
a
that might be
very,
it.
Health conscious place.
Yeah.
Too. People are
'Cause
very
if
outdoorsy.
you go to like hikes, which we love hiking, like at 9 a.m., you can't find a parking spot like anywhere at like the.
Yeah, I'm not going
not
anywhere at
popular
9 a.m.
hikes.
if I'm not at work.
Yeah, now
Yeah.
I've embraced it. Now I don't even.
Nice.
Yeah.
Faith, I wanted to ask you a little bit too about, you had your daughter during fellowship. So what was that experience like for other, folks that might
Oh, yes.
have a similar, make a similar choice to be a parent during fellowship?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was a very positive experience overall. And I mean, definitely leaned on my co-fellows a bit, and they were able to, or we all adjusted our schedules so that I could just I took 12 weeks off actually and had it all pretty much protected. I went to like a conference during it or something like that, but then I didn't have to extend fellowship because you can just work, if you work more condensed weeks at a time and more calls in a shorter period of time, you can make 12 weeks work. But they had to adjust their schedules, I'm sure, because of that. So
But we were
very
happy
grateful
too.
to them for
and
doing
it was
that.
very doable.
It was very
It
doable.
wasn't-
Yeah. It wasn't my first year, so I think that made it much easier because the clinical load is lighter in second and third year, and so then you can just shift things around, do more third year, things like that. And everyone was so supportive. There were multiple baby showers. Everyone.
Well, we
Yeah.
are neonatologists.
Yeah. Yes, everyone was incredibly supportive. I was able to, or the program, like Stanford, comes from the Department of Pediatrics, I think. I heard like Dr. Leonard spearheaded this thing where you can get a portable pump. So I got a portable pump for free, like this really nice one. So then I was able to pump at work even after for like many months and felt very well supported with that.
Nice.
I mean, I could do it on the go. So they wanted it portable for a reason because you can definitely then still be at the things you need to be at.
Nice.
Yeah, but everyone was incredibly supportive.
That's awesome.
And
to
she
hear.
has the cutest baby.
Yeah, Mila's so wonderful.
We love her.
We love Mila.
Yes, my extended family will be so sad.
Yeah. So where are all of you heading? Can we say this? Is it public knowledge?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
We're happy to share.
Yeah. I'm going back home. I mean, speaking of having a child, we just really wanted to go back to be near family, to have help with the baby and some like emergency child care opportunity, just like be closer to I have many sisters and they have kids. So I wanted to be closer to them. So I'm going to Children's of Minnesota.
Congrats.
Yes.
Yeah.
I am not going too far, so I'm staying in the Bay Area. My partner is still finishing his training, so I'm going to be at UCSF.
Amazing.
And I am going a little further south, but staying in California per my husband's request. Strong recommendation. So I will be at CHLA, Children's Hospital Los Angeles.
Oh, that's so great. And so these are all junior faculty positions within your respective institutions.
Yeah.
And if anyone is wondering, I mean, the job market is, of course, is good right now. So maybe this will change. But I felt like we all had opportunities to go where we wanted with multiple offers, like with the places we've looked at.
Great.
So we were truly set up for success at Stanford.
Yeah. And I should mention, so like the three of us all did more clinically focused research. And so Hannah and I are staying academic and Faith is taking a private job, but it's like, what's the term? Like private-demic? Like she still gets to teach fellows and be in a super busy unit. But we do have fellows who do like bench science and, want to go down the K to R path. So certainly if that's your jam, you will find like-minded people at Stanford. But we all went more of the clinical educator route.
Yeah. And there's a lot of institutional support in neonatology and pediatrics here for the K to R minded folks coming in as well.
Yes.
Yeah. But there's also excellent support if you do want to go the more clinical route, whether that's in academics or potentially like a hybrid or outside.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing all the faculty, once again, helped you to clarify your goals around whether you wanted to be a clinical educator or more K to R, basic. Well, none of you did bench research, but can you talk a little bit about some of those conversations?
Yeah. It's been a lot of soul searching this
Yes.
year, I feel like, to be like, oh, who do I want to be for the next 5 years? And like, I think getting a lot of mentorship along that soul searching, and some of the mentorship guidance being like, what you do for the next 5 years may not be what you do for the next 25 years. And that is totally fine.
Yeah.
And like a lot of people, like when we pivoted in fellowship, like a lot of people pivot later in their career in different ways also.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that like having the opportunity to speak with like lots of different people in the soul searching path, and I think at least the mentors that I've talked to, no one's been like, you have to do this, and then you have to do this, and then this is the path you're going to take. It's really like Sheila mentioned earlier, like, what do you want to do? Like, where do you want to be? Like, these are the paths and the opportunities that might serve you best, like given what you've said.
Yeah.
And just observing our faculty, those that are truly are like in that K to R path, just have such deep passion, and you can tell would be lost if they couldn't do this research. And so I feel like that also helps clarify your own goals when you're like, okay, would I like be devastated if I couldn't continue with research or not? And so it helps you make at least, or gives you some clarity about the fork in the road that you have to decide. Because I think we're all, or you're so used to academic medicine up to this point because that's all you're ever involved with traditional medical education.
Yeah.
And so it's certainly, some soul searching that goes into the next step.
And I do feel like we get mentorship about like the logistical part of life too. Like it's not like you're trying to find your dream job in a vacuum. Like you're trying to find the best fit job for you in the life circumstance that you happen to be in right now.
Yeah.
So like Dr. Alexis Davis, who we've talked about earlier, like offered great pieces of advice, I think, for me, and like how to be realistic in finding a job when you're in like a 2-physician partnership, and then my partner is going down the wonderful K to R route. And so like, how do we finance ourselves if we're planning to stay in the Bay Area for a little bit longer? And just there are things that you need to think about outside of just, is this the perfect job for me? And I feel like we've like our mentors are very thoughtful about like the extra stuff too.
And reminding us that the next job like doesn't have to be forever. Right. Most people switch jobs, and so you just have to do what feels right in the moment and can always pivot.
Yeah. But we're
so if our future employers are listening, that's not our plan.
Yes.
We love you all.
I will say,
yes,
we're
I
all
feel like we
very
got so
happy.
lucky.
Like we are like thrilled.
Yeah, we
Yes.
didn't have to compromise
Yes.
for anything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like all of us just feel so fortunate to have the opportunities for like the next step in our careers. And like just so supported in like finding those opportunities and getting those opportunities. And like I am so excited for what's coming next.
And I do feel like we were really lucky. Like we all had multiple offers, which was exciting and also incredibly stressful. And I do think the job search process was probably the most stressed I've ever felt in fellowship. Like it truly
was hard.
It was really hard. But our mentors, like Lisa, was so good at talking to me about, okay, like here's how you've heard back from one place, but you haven't heard back from the other. Here's how you buy more time with one and try to speed up the other so you can get all your offers at the same time. And just all of that like real life practical advice that I didn't even think about, you know, when you're first starting fellowship and just trying to learn how to intubate. I really feel like the faculty have been there kind of every step of the way.
She took us for Mexican food and even would like review the emails if we were trying to say something more like a negotiating type email, then she would help us word most effectively, and they were incredibly helpful. Yeah.
Very hands-on.
But some of them, they were like, we can only do our best because the job market was different when we went through this.
Yeah. Right.
So then like you still feel like, it's still a new area that you have to go into. So then we leaned on our fellows from years above us, and they were incredibly helpful as well. There's just a huge support system for everything.
And I mean, I think the process must be different than doing, residency or fellowship match, where
Totally.
it seems like,
Yeah.
as I understand it, like you rank yours and the schools rank theirs, and then you see like the alignment, and this is a different job market is a different process.
Yeah. I kind of wish.
I know. Sometimes you wish
Yeah.
it could just be another match.
Put me back in the match.
I know.
Figure it out
Yes.
for me.
Yeah.
Yes. It did feel kind of silly, like applying for my first real job in my mid-30s.
Yeah.
Like, how do I do this?
Oh, wow.
But
We're finally adults.
yeah. Yeah.
No, I
but
think-
we all came out of it intact and happy.
Yes.
Yeah. And you have so much education and experience, and I mean, I don't think you should feel like less of a 30-something because this is the first time you're applying for like a quote unquote like big adult job. You've done amazing things, all of you. I'm
Thank you.
very humbled to be in your presence.
That's very kind. That's
Too
too
kind.
kind.
No, it's true. It's true. So I have just a few more questions.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think that prospective fellows should know?
I think that's something that I realized later in my own fellowship search. Like there's so many different NICU fellowships all around, and they're all so different. Like I feel like maybe when I was applying to residency, it felt like, oh, like it's clinical work. Like there was, I think, less difference among the programs I was looking at. But there is a huge variation in like even amount of clinical time. There's huge variation in kind of where the research expertise within a certain division is. There's like a huge variation in mentorship available at the different programs. And I really think there's like no perfect like NICU fellowship. And I think it really is like finding what is going to be a good fit for you. And I felt like that more as I was looking for jobs too. Like there's no perfect first job for everybody. Like it's really like what are like looking inside and being like, what am I looking for? What do I think I want to do? Who might I think I want to work with? And where do I think I want my future to be? Knowing that like all of us experience, like that can shift pretty drastically,
Right.
and still be fine. And I feel like Stanford's one of those places where like you can pretty much shift in whatever direction you want to go and like be totally fine still. But I think it's like not necessarily looking for like perfect, but just like what fits you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah, I feel like I am someone who needs or wants to like have clarity on who I'm going to work with as soon as possible and what I'm going to be doing and get started on it as soon as possible. And I would give the advice like, if you need to pivot from that, like if you had this group identified or research question identified, you can always pivot if you're like, it's not jiving, or like, I don't know if these are my people, and you can always pivot, and it's never too late to do that because it's only going to serve you in the future.
Yeah. I think I totally agree with what both of you said. I think this is not related to what you were talking about, but one thing we haven't really touched on yet is the like presentations we have to give in fellowship. So we have a weekly case conference that meets on Fridays where we discuss like interesting cases. So they could either be like rare diagnoses or a common diagnosis and a common problem, and talking about different approaches. And the fellows are responsible for giving those conferences. So we each do like 5 to 6 a year. And I think initially I was super overwhelmed every time I had a case conference that week. I would spend like days working on it. But honestly, it was a really good skill practicing giving, a 45-minute talk, an interactive discussion, right? You're not speaking the entire time uninterrupted. But I do think it was a really good skill for us to figure out, how do you make an engaging talk and get people to chime in and, pick an interesting case and review the literature. And when it came to giving job talks, I think the fact that we had already spent so much time preparing how to do, 45-minute presentations, it made that process a little bit easier. So I do think that was nice. I feel like, we give journal club and we give research club to update on our work. So there are opportunities within the division to practice speaking before we have to do it at a conference or do it for an interview, which is kind of nice.
The research seminars were certainly helpful in preparing for job talks at academic institutions because the format is very similar.
Yeah.
And, as you are preparing to graduate now, I'm curious to know, what's been the most rewarding experience you've had here at Stanford?
The people.
I know.
Each other. Just being together.
I know. I feel like it's like working with you guys.
Yeah.
Which sounds so cliche, but it's really true.
It is. Yeah, but I think it's just like us as a class. I think it's like the mentorship we've had in our attendings, and I think it's like really the opportunity to do whatever you could really possibly dream of in your like scholarly time, and like the flexibility to explore kind of multiple different options here.
Yeah. And I feel like the people we get to work with clinically, like, I love our fellows. I love our attendings. We have some like really strong NPs who have such expertise in things like POCUS. And like some of the nursing leadership has been so awesome to work with, and our bedside nurses, we partner with them on our health equity initiatives. Like it's been really nice. I feel like the culture of the division and also like the culture of the staff in our unit, like people really do want to improve and make it a good place to work in for us and for the babies and families. And that's been really, I think, something that has struck me as different at Stanford compared to other institutions. Like I feel like we really all care about making it a better experience for the babies and their families.
Yeah, and truly enjoy working with one another and love each other's company like everywhere. We had a visiting attending and a visiting resident I saw at PAS, and they said like they recognized, or they've worked at lots of different places and felt like the camaraderie or just like everyone's relationship with one another was way stronger, and it was a unique thing that they saw about Stanford. And I was like, yeah, I guess.
Yeah. I think we take it for granted because it's become so normal.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think a lot of programs have the fellows, going to karaoke with the frontline providers.
We went with all the APPs. We had the best night of karaoke with them.
Yeah. No, but I think the camaraderie for sure. And then like within the fellowship, I do feel like there is a culture of like saying yes. Like Melissa like tries her hardest to say yes to us when we like ask for things. Like one of our second year fellows, May, got this PSDP grant, which is phenomenal. Like she is a bench science researcher, so she got funding to mostly do science for the next couple years, and the fellowship found a way to make that happen and support her. Like I got funding to do a global health rotation and do some med ed in Rwanda for my last 6 weeks of fellowship. And so
you leave tomorrow.
And I leave tomorrow.
Don't go.
I know, I'm still like devastated and in denial. But like everyone arranged their schedule, and so you guys are working a little bit later into the year than third years typically do. But like people just like make stuff possible, I think. There's like a culture of saying like, let's figure that out, I think.
Yeah, Melissa was even telling me that when I talked to her recently, you can sort of like have neonatology and like something else. Like
there are people who are dual fellowship trained. We don't have any of those in our program right now, but it is possible. I hit my limit at medical training. I'm like, I'm in my mid-30s. It's time to get a real job.
But there are people, to your point, Hannah.
Like it's possible. We have, we have one fellow getting a master's right now.
Yeah.
There's typically like one per class. We just were a little atypical our year. Yeah, May's got PSTP. A lot of us are grant funded, not me, but lots of other fellows. So I think we make it work.
Yeah.
And people are happy to make it work. They're like truly excited when good things happen to us that require more logistical planning.
Yeah. So I in terms of choosing Stanford again, now that you've been here for 3 years, would you?
Totally.
In a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I have been doing these interviews since I arrived here 10 years ago with fellows. They were always in print rather than audio. And so I'm really, really so grateful to the three of you for doing this recording with me. And I think that we were able to cover so much more than we were able to ever in print. And hopefully, it'll be great for listeners to hear directly from you in your voice how this experience has been. In the show notes, we'll have links to the Neonatology website, Neonatology Twitter, the ways you can contact these three lovely individuals. And they have all shared with me that if you have any questions at all about what the fellowship experience might be like at Stanford, don't hesitate to reach out to them. And so with that, thank you all for listening. Thank you to my guests for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you to EdTech for putting this together.
Yes,
you all
so
are
much.
amazing. And till next time.